Hello and welcome to a special video with Cendien. My name is Sebastian, a marketing associate with Cendien, and today we'll be listening to Israel, our managing director, speak while attending a user group meeting. The topic today is security, and here's Israel to take it away.
There was a couple of questions with regards to like G Suite and stuff like that. I think with G Suite, what I would say is the new landmark applications offer a lot of API tools like Swagger. So you can write your own API calls from G Suite into the landmark applications, and that works very well with the G Suite. It's not an Infor delivered product, but the APIs themselves are all supported by Infor, and you have full access to all the APIs. Every business class, every transaction, every field is available on the API, and you can get those. I think they're up to they have different versions, but as you go to the newer version of the landmark tools, you get the latest and greatest of all those APIs. Really, all I want to do is make it informal. I had a formal presentation. It was the same presentation that Dell provided, so I'm not going to do that. What I want to say is that if you're using security now, the difference between security in LAUA, LSA, and landmark security is completely different. In LAUA, everything was consolidated in one place. When you go from that security to landmark security, then you start looking at different applications. You have Mingle, you have Landmark, you have LSF. So the security components change as you migrate to the different versions of the Infor products. Now you have to worry about adding a user in Mingle, using ISS to sync the users across, and all that stuff is changing as you go from one version to the next. Like if you have LSA and you go to Landmark Security, you use ISS. Now when you go to Infor OS, you start using IFS in Mingle and user bots to sync the information across. Where before you would use ISS to sync the users to multiple applications. Now you use user bots on IFS, on Mingle version 12 to do all that stuff. So it's I think what's happening with the Infor application is that there's a transition of the applications. There's a lot of changes going on, and all the infrastructure is changing. IFS is changing, ISS is changing. And it can get confusing because you don't know when they're saying ISS and IFS and things like that. Two different things they use for different things, right? ISS is to sync this stuff over, and then IFS is to move the data from one federation services to move it from one application to the next. I really want to just open it up for questions. Have you guys ask me questions and answer any questions that you might have. What I would say is that on the landmark security, everything is business class based. On LSA and LAUA, there were all programs and forms, and people were used to that kind of security mentality. I have a form, how do I secure it? You have the forms, and then you have the tables. Now you have forms, fields, user data, a lot more stuff that you have to worry about. And typically an implementation project for security is you analyze it based on what the job role of that person is, what access they need, what do you want to lock down, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions that you want to ask? I know we're in the later part of the day, but
I got a little question. So, they tell you they get base roles, right? Delivered out of the box roles. And I caveat this question, knowing the version 11 is pretty new. What are you seeing the clients do? Do they just take these roles and say, go with it? Or do you see them putting in a decent amount of effort to manipulating delivered roles into what they want?
Yeah, good question. On the standard deliverer template, they're on the ST on the role is the role name _ ST. It's called the standard template. You can't modify those. You cannot modify those. You can take those roles and copy them and then make modifications there. And typically, what I would recommend is that you put the _ ST, change it to your company code, whatever you want to call it. And then what we see is that you analyze the business class and the security restrictions that you want to make to that role, and then implement that on the configuration console. So let's say you don't want the users to have access to a certain field, or you don't want them to have access to a certain amount of data. You make that change on the security class and attach that to the role that's holding that security class. So you make the changes with rules on the security class, that's custom, and then you attach that to the actual role, and then assign that to the actor for that user.
And you see people doing that a lot, like are they really manipulating the base role, or the base role is pretty good?
No, we see a lot of custom, you know when they say we deliver a set of custom, roles for users, those roles are just the base. You know, a lot of our security work is all custom roles, custom security class, all of that, it's custom.
Okay, thank you.
Question for you. We used to be on Adam, then we moved to AD/LDS.
Okay.
Is what my guy tells me. And then of course I see Lawson saying, hey, you have to be AD/FS.
Yes.
How is AD/FS different than AD/LDS?
It's similar, but it's not the same. You know, and everyone's going to be required to move to ADFS as we go to Infor OS. I think it's version 11, version 12. You know, it's just a different name to call that version, Infor OS. You're going to be required to go to ADFS, and basically what's happening is you have two things: authentication, and then what they use to control the security access. ADFS controls who has access to the application. Does that make sense? So everyone's going to be required to go to ADFS with the Infor OS version of Infor. Does that answer the question?
It does, because he brought me back. You know, we have ADFS installed somewhere in our building, but it's not connected to Lawson at all. So we're going to have to obviously move things out of LDS and put them into ADFS.
Yes, and it's a big impact, because ADFS is tied to your whole organization. It's tied to Active Directory, so it's not something that you can do like SSOP identities and things like that. It's a big undertaking to implement the ADFS authentication method, and then you use that for your Mingle, you use that for Landmark, you use that for LSF. Right now, they're using ADFS solely for Mingle. What's being pushed is that people have to go to ADFS for Landmark, for LSF, for all the components, workforce management.
Right. We already have single sign-on, which is stored in our AD/LDS.
Right.
And, you know, and he's like, oh yeah, ADFS is single sign-on. I'm like, okay. They sound
similar. It's like the ISS and IFS. It's very similar, but it's different. Yeah. And you can have a hybrid environment where you have on-prem, on cloud, and then you're authenticating against Microsoft Azure. You know, so you have your Azure as your ADFS component. You have your apps on premise. Some of them, at least, you're like LSF, and then you have your cloud suite on the cloud. So it's a very complex architecture and how to set all that stuff up.
So along those lines, is ADFS just Active Directory federated services? So would it incorporate with your corporation's current Active Directory environment? You'd start managing it through Active Directory groups and organizational units and things like that. And so does the LDAP that is specifically Lawson centric, does that go away?
Goes away.
Oh, okay.
Well, now would be 10 though. I mean,
Now would be 10. It's the newer version. Infor OS, newer version. It's all the newer version. The version 10, all that stuff is LDAP. All that stuff is all on there. You know, Adam and all that.
So is the migration to ADFS required for 10, or is this just for 11?
I think it's required, definitely required for the Infor OS applications, right?
Okay.
For the main goal version 11, 12, whatever they're calling it.
So what we were talking about this morning, and I'd encourage you to do more research. So they said in February of 19, they're going to stop maintaining Lawson Security Service Token Service, which means quickly you're going to want to get on it. But what one of the other LGUD board members had found out is that a certain ESP coming up will require ADSL.
Next ESP requires it.
So while technically you don't have to do anything, if you want to stay current, you're going to have to move to that before applying the next ESP. Tell Sandy she needs to get on it.
Yeah, and it's something you should plan.
Exactly. What are you doing? Yeah, so that is B10 then, not just the 11.
Right, and it's something you should plan, because you may customize the look and feel of your ADFS, and you use that for other applications within the organization. Now it's also being used for Infor, so it's not just something that you can do overnight. It's something you have to plan for.
Does it require any schema changes to Active Directory to those?
I think there's some requirements around schemas, but they're minimal. They're not a whole lot of changes there. And you can customize the whole look and feel. If you want to have a message. If you want to have them to click here to call support, you have an image on one side and the fields for the user and the password on the other side. You can customize the whole look and feel of that.
Israel, can you still write conditional security rules? So right now I use like a reporting group. And if someone's in a group, they can see the social security number on the employee record. If they're not, then it's just blank. Same functionality available in Landmark?
Different, a little different, because you use it on the security class, right? So you set up the security class and then attach that security class with the rules. The rules are going to be slightly different because now you have business classes. So you restrict the business class on the security class and then attach that security class to the role. It's slightly different than before.
So would you have distinct security classes giving different levels of access to that field?
Yes.
And then that would be attached to the role. You'd have essentially a different role for different levels of access to that field per user?
Per user,
right?
you can also have...
Forcing you to split where you can do it conditionally now.
Right. You can also have what they call actor context. So you can set up an actor context and define your rule to look at the actor context. So say you say, okay, I want this security class to do this function, but I want this actor context to limit the data that they view. You can do it that way.
There.
Yeah, you use the actor context to limit the data view of that user.
Thanks.
Any questions? Any other questions? I also wanted to mention a few things. Your reporting mechanism for the landmark security is very different than your reporting mechanism for your LSA, right? That LSA had really nice, powerful features to do reporting. You had different conditions where you run reports. All that stuff is brand new, and they're building it now on Landmark. We actually helped them develop the 4 security reports that they currently have. The reports that they have now, you have to run it by user. So where before you could say, I want the report by a certain business class or a certain, role or a security class. Now it's all by users. So I think that would change as the applications mature, but it's very limited right now in terms of reporting for user and security class and roles. The other thing is user bots. These user bots are going to be critical to the application and to security. Synchronizing. What's happening is that Infor is building a bunch of different applications, workforce management, EPM, and all these different things, and they wanted to find a good way to sync security across the different applications. So they're using these bots that, based on XML, that transfer the data from the main component, like Mingle, across the different things. Before you were using ISS to do this stuff. Now all that stuff is on the user bots. And you'll have what they call Ion Desk. And you go to Ion Desk to review whether the user was successfully added, whether the roles migrated over or synchronized over. All that stuff is going to be on your Ion Desk. The technology is completely changing. What you see now is completely changing what you have on the newer versions.
And that was our special video with our Managing Director, Israel. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, comments, or maybe suggestions for future videos, be sure to leave us a line at the email below. My name's Sebastian, wishing you a great rest of your day.